from the UK. And in Dublin Airport, which last year was Europe's fastest growing major airport and second in the prior 2 years, we're critically dependent on air access from the UK. We serve 23 airports and 30% of our connecting passengers are through the UK. And Dublin London is the busiest single air route in Europe. Cork Airport, our second airport in the south of Ireland. We serve 13 UK airports and we have a dependency of 58% on UK traffic. Next slide. On the next slide, clearly you can see since the Open Skies started that the number of intra-EU city pair routes has gone up by 5-fold, and also the number of routes with more than 2 carriers has gone up by 10-fold. And you can also see Dublin Airport's traffic, the top right-hand corner, has gone up by similar proportions from 5 million passengers pre-liberalisation to nearly 28 million passengers last year. And that has delivered huge benefits for Ireland. Next slide. Huge benefits. You can see our route network has grown from 36 routes to 127 routes across that period with cheaper, far deeper connectivity. If we move to the next slide, you can see that the UK has caused this problem by deciding to leave, and 53% of UK traffic is to and from the EU. However, Ireland, of all the EU nations, is most exposed, with 39% of all our traffic in and out of the UK. On the other hand, you can see Germany and France, who are going to be two of the key negotiators, have 6 or 7% of their air traffic in and out of the UK. So clearly, when it gets into the negotiation, we think it's one that's very, very uneven when it comes to aviation, and Ireland in particular is potentially going to be very badly exposed. Next slide. If you look across Europe, the regional airports are the most exposed to this cliff, and if you look at the very high percentages of airports that are dependent on UK traffic, those regional airports that are most exposed financially and where air access is most important are in a very, very difficult position. Next slide. If you look over the last 25 years, there's a very strong correlation between UK GDP trends and UK air travel. Right now, we know that nobody's suggesting that the UK economy is going to improve after Brexit, and that's before the impact of any single skies problem comes to bear. So we think it's very, very negative. For Ireland, 42% of our tourists come from the UK, and 44% of our business trips are to and from the UK. Next slide. Tourism is a key industry for us. 1 in 10 people almost are employed in tourism. It's over €1 billion of an industry between Ireland and the UK. However, it's not limited to that. One, we depend on the UK for tourists coming in and are critically exposed, as that will weaken going forward. Secondly, Ireland also competes with the UK for tourists. Ireland really is competing with Scotland, Wales, Lake District, Cornwall, Devon, and we think that's going to be very, very severely impacted potentially as we go forward. Next slide. You can see that 75 to 80% of our traffic is leisure related to and from the UK, and we think that's discretionary and potentially going to be negatively impacted. Next slide. A lot of people say this is all imaginary, it's all in the future, it's not going to happen. We think it's an iceberg. Whilst our passenger numbers so far for the half year are up 6%, what that really is disguising is the fact that inbound trips from the UK are down 7% and falling like a stone. So our good performance in outbound as the Irish economy picks up, as North American and Middle Eastern and European business works well, is disguising the fact that there's already the first Brexit-related decline happening. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Key actions. There are 5 key actions. We've got a key challenge, which is how do we maintain connectivity as the US and now the UK pulls back. So therefore it's about making sure that we stay very actively connected as an island. We're the furthest part of the EU after Brexit from the rest of the EU. We're also pushing on with key infrastructure developments such as our new northern parallel runway in Dublin. Secondly, and critically important, is that the single skies remain. We think there is a cliff hang ahead of us. We're very, very concerned that whilst March 19 feels like it's a long way away, I think from March 18 our customers are going to be deciding what, if anything, they're going to be prepared to sell, or they're going to have to vote with their feet ahead of certainty. Next slide. Tourism and the free movement of people is critically important as well. We've got a common travel area. That needs to be maintained. We have common visa arrangements with the UK. They need to be maintained. And Ireland, as a critical EU player and participant needs to not be disadvantaged by these actions driven by the UK. So therefore we think something like a Schengen arrangement on visas for Ireland would be appropriate. Fourthly, continued cooperation on safety and security and common standards is critical. The last thing we need is different arrangements, different costs, more complexity. And lastly, importantly, as a business, there are going to be opportunities, whether that's the relocation of EU agencies based in the UK to Ireland, which we're actively going after, for example, the European Medical Association, or the return of duty-free on domestic UK flights and ones going to and from Ireland. So we'll be looking for those advantages as well. So in summary, we're very concerned. We think there's a real danger. We're the most exposed of any of the EU countries that will remain, and we think it needs to be addressed urgently and clarity brought to bear. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Toland.